July 11th, 1991, 1:20 p.m. 50 million people look up at the same time. The sun disappears over Mexico. Mexico City is plunged into total darkness. For almost 7 minutes, day turns into night. But something else happened that day in the sky. Thousands of people began to see something. A bright, suspended, motionless object. Video cameras capture it from Mexico City, from Puebla, from Querétaro. Locations separated by more than 100 kilometers. Phone lines collapsed. News programs interrupted their regular programming. And Mexico entered what some would call the most documented mass UFO sighting in history. But what did they actually see? Welcome. I'm David, and today we're going to investigate one of the most fascinating and debated cases in Mexican ufology. The solar eclipse of July 11th, 1991, was no ordinary eclipse. It was the longest total solar eclipse of the 20th century, lasting a record 7 minutes and 2 seconds at its peak. An event that only occurs once every 300 years in the same location. The shadow's path crossed Mexico from west to east. It began in Baja California, crossed through 15 states, and culminated over Mexico City, one of the most populated metropolises in the world. For weeks, the entire country prepared for the event. The government launched massive information campaigns. The media talked of nothing else. Millions of people bought special filters. Schools organized vigils. And when the moment arrived, the skies over Mexico were under the scrutiny of more simultaneous witnesses than any other event in the country's history. But no one expected the eclipse to bring anything else with it. Something that would divide opinions, unleash controversies, and forever change the way Mexicans look at the sky. This is a full story of what happened that day. The facts, the evidence, the testimonies, and the questions that still remain unanswered. To understand what happened on July 11th, we first need to understand Mexico in 1991. Carlos Salinas de Gortari was president. The country was undergoing a period of transformation, massive privatizations, economic modernization, and preparations for the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States and Canada. It was a Mexico seeking to project itself into the future. But it was also a country where the memory of the 1985 earthquake was still fresh, where distrust in official institutions was high, and where millions of people were searching for certainty in a time of rapid change. The eclipse came in the midst of this context. Weeks before the event, the federal government created the Intersecretarial Commission for the Eclipse, a joint effort between the Ministry of the Interior and CONICET, National Council of Science and Technology. Its mission: to inform the public about the risks of looking directly at the sun. The warnings were constant, almost apocalyptic. Looking at the sun can cause permanent blindness. Special filters were sold on the streets for 1,000 old pesos. Some people made them at home with metallic paper. Others used photographic negatives. The fear was real, and rightly so. But that fear also meant that on July 11th, millions of Mexicans would be doing something they normally never do: staring at the sky for several minutes. Significant pause, and that would change everything. This story has several protagonists. Ordinary people who became witnesses to something extraordinary or an extraordinary mix-up, depending on who you ask. Guillermo Arreguín, television reporter, the man whose video will become the most famous and debated of all. According to those who knew him, he was a noble, sincere person with no interest in creating a hoax. Jaime Maussan, investigative journalist with over 2 decades in the media, a graduate of Miami University in radio and television. For years earlier, he had produced a program about Billy Meyer, a Swiss man who claimed to have made contact with extraterrestrials. The program was a success, but Maussan didn't imagine that this was just the beginning. July 11th, 1991 would change his life forever. And then there were the ordinary witnesses. Eric Aguilar, a 19-year-old student on a rooftop with his girlfriend. Luis Lara, a businessman 100 kilometers away. The Breton family in Puebla. And thousands more who decided to record the eclipse that day with their home video cameras. Pause! None of them knew that they were about to capture something that scientists, skeptics, and believers would debate for decades. The morning of July 11th dawned clear in Mexico City. perfect conditions. 20,000 police officers patrolled the streets, not to control crime, but to guide the public. The Red Cross had deployed 2,000 doctors, 1,500 ambulances, and 300,000 volunteers. Emergencies were expected. Traffic accidents, people fainting from excitement or from looking at the sun without protection. But nobody was prepared for what was really going to happen. At 11:23 in the morning, the shadow of the moon touched land in Baja California Sur. It began its journey eastward. Sinaloa, Nayarit, Jalisco, Aguascalientes, Guanajuato. The shadow advanced at thousands of kilometers per hour, devouring the daylight. In every city, people took to the streets, to the rooftops, to the parks. Millions of faces raised, protected with makeshift filters, waiting for the exact moment. 1:20 p.m. Mexico City. The last ray of sunlight disappears behind the moon. For 6 minutes and 54 seconds, the nation's capital was plunged into total darkness. A darkness that wasn't night, but something else. Strange, disturbing. The birds flew frantically to their nests. At the Chapultepec Zoo, the animals retreated to sleep, confused by the trickery of their biological clocks. The flowers closed. The city lights turned on automatically, and in the sky, now visible in broad daylight, the stars shone. The planets, Venus, the brightest of all, glowed on the horizon. Jupiter was visible on the other side of the sky. The sun's corona, normally invisible, created a spectral halo around the moon's black disk, a spectacle that only occurs during total eclipses, a moment of otherworldly beauty. But some were seeing something more. On a rooftop in southern Mexico City, 19-year-old Eric Adelar was adjusting his video camera. He wanted to capture the perfect moment of the eclipse. His girlfriend was with him. Suddenly, she pointed towards the sky. "What's that?" At first it looked like just a white dot, but when they focused more closely, they saw that it was shining brightly. It wasn't twinkling like a star. It wasn't moving like an airplane. It was simply there, suspended. Eric started recording. 100 kilometers away, in another part of the city, Luis Lara, a businessman, was doing exactly the same thing. He too had seen the object. He too was filming it. In his viewfinder, the object appeared clearly. A disk, the top part shiny, silvery, the bottom part dark, as if it cast a shadow. She's not a star, Lara thought. Stars don't have shadows. And 80 miles away in Puebla, the Breton family was also pointing their camera at the same object. In their video, something else was visible, a kind of wave-like disturbance behind the disk, as if the air itself were distorted. 3 people, 3 different locations, 3 videos of the same object. Coincidence? Meanwhile, at Televisa's broadcast center, Mexico's most famous journalist was narrating the eclipse live. Jacobo Zabudowski, anchor of the 24 Hours news program, was the official voice of Mexico. That afternoon, while his entire team rushed to see the eclipse, he stayed in the studio, fulfilling a professional duty. He was one of the few residents of Mexico City who did not witness the eclipse in person. But hours later, he would broadcast something that no one expected. That same night, after the eclipse, Guillermo Arreguín, a television reporter, arrived at the Televisa offices with a videotape, what I had recorded during the eclipse. The news producers reviewed the footage. On the screen, clearly visible, a circular object, silver on top, dark on the bottom, suspended in the sky, apparently rotating. The decision was made quickly. This would be broadcast that same night. Hours after the eclipse ended, millions of Mexicans who had seen the natural phenomenon were now seeing this. The video of an alleged UFO over Mexico City. The object remained motionless for several minutes. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a plane. It didn't appear to be a balloon. It was simply there. Televisa's phone lines collapsed within minutes. What happened in the following days was unprecedented. A week after the eclipse, Jaime Maussan showed Arreguín's video on his investigative program. The response was immediate and massive. Thousands of people called and say they too had seen the object that same day. But that's not all. Dozens of viewers sent in their own videos from different parts of the city. from Puebla, from Querétaro. Independent videos, recorded by people who didn't know each other, showing similar objects. Some showed a silver disc, others an object with flashing lights. In several, that strange disturbance could be seen behind the object. The question was inevitable. How is it possible that so many people, in such distant locations, had captured the same phenomenon? Mexican television responded with special programs. The first, organized by Nino Cannon, lasted from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. 8 hours of live testimonies, video analysis, and interviews with witnesses. The second program broke all records, from 11 at night until 9 the next morning. 10 uninterrupted hours. Mexico couldn't stop talking about it. Newspapers devoted entire pages to it. Magazines published special features. In the streets, in offices, in schools, there was only one topic of conversation. What did we see that day? Jaime Maussan made a public appeal. He invited young people with video cameras and free time to become the sky watchers. Their mission, to observe and record any anomalous objects flying over the city. The response was massive. Dozens of teenagers and young adults began spending hours on their rooftops, cameras in hand, waiting. And according to them, the objects kept appearing. September 1992, during the Independence Day celebrations, a similar disc was reported over the Zocalo. This time, according to witnesses, it descended rapidly and disappeared. September 1993, during the military air show, as a squadron of helicopters crossed the sky, the metallic disc reappeared. This time, it seemed to be in close proximity to the helicopters. Mexico had entered what some would call the UFO decade, and it all began with that eclipse. But what did the experts say? What explanation did they find for this massive phenomenon? This is where the story gets complicated. Thousands of professional astronomers were in Mexico that day. They had come from all over the world to study the eclipse. Sophisticated telescopes, measuring equipment, specialized cameras. None of them reported seeing any anomalous objects. None of them published photographs of the object in scientific journals. There are no wide-angle images taken by professionals showing the alleged UFO alongside the eclipse. Skeptical researchers began their own analysis. They used astronomical software, specifically the Easy Cosmos program, to accurately recreate the sky over Mexico City on July 11, 1991, between 1 o'clock and 1:30 p.m. The results were clear. In the exact position where the object appears in the most famous videos, there was a perfectly identifiable celestial body, a known planet, the third brightest object in the sky after the sun and the moon, Venus. During the eclipse, with the sky darkened, Venus became completely visible, bright, unmistakable. And for people not used to observing the sky, without familiar landmarks due to the artificial darkness of the eclipse, it might seem like something extraordinary. The analysis went further. In one of Luis Lara's videos, the researchers found something revealing. In the upper left of the UFO, another star appeared in the correct position according to their calculations. And even more, Mars was also visible in his video, exactly where it should be. The stars didn't lie. Neither did the astronomical calculations. But then, why did the object appear to be disc-shaped? Why was there a shadow on the bottom? Video experts pointed out the limitations of home cameras of that era. When focusing on a bright light source, VHS cameras could create visual artifacts, halos, distortions, lens effects. The shadow could simply be a contrast effect. The disc shape could be the result of how the camera processed a bright point of light against a dark background, and the apparent rotating motion could be explained by the natural movement of the hands of the person holding the camera for several minutes. Plausible explanations, scientifically sound. But the Venus explanation is convincing. It's supported by precise astronomical calculations, expert video analysis, and the fact that no professional astronomer reported any anomalies. However, there are elements that don't fit together perfectly. First, multiple and independent testimonies. 100 kilometers separate the main witnesses. Guillermo Arreguín in Mexico City. Luis Lara 60 miles away. The Breton family in Puebla 80 miles away. They all describe similar characteristics: a silver object with a shadow on the bottom, suspended, apparently rotating. Is it possible that so many people, without communication between them, mistook Venus in the exact same way? Second, the visual disturbance. Several videos show what appears to be a distortion of the air behind the object, like heat waves, as if something were generating energy. Venus does not generate any visible atmospheric disturbances. It is a point of light, nothing more. Third, subsequent sightings. In 1992 and 1993, during large public events, similar objects were reported and filmed. In some cases, such as the 1993 air show, the object appeared in the same frame as military helicopters. If the object was traveling against the wind, as some analyses suggest, it could hardly have been a balloon. If it was in close proximity to the helicopters, the pilots should have seen it, but there are no official reports from the pilots. Fourth, the absence of official investigation. Unlike other countries where similar phenomena have been investigated by government or military institutions, in Mexico, the case of the 1991 eclipse was never the subject of an official documented study. The only time the Mexican government publicly acknowledged a UFO event was in 2004, when the Ministry of Defense gave Jaime Maussan the video of the Campeche incident, where military pilots detected objects on their infrared radars. But regarding the 1991 eclipse, absolute official silence, because there is something else worth considering, something that both believers and skeptics recognize. On July 11, 1991, for the first time in history, 50 million people looked to the sky simultaneously for almost 7 minutes. Not casually, but with complete attention, with cameras ready, with anticipation. Normally, no one looks at the sky with that intensity. We live with our eyes fixed ahead, downwards on our screens. The sky is a background we ignore. But on that day, all of Mexico decided to look up, and he saw something. The question is, what? Regardless of whether the object was Venus, a UFO, or some unknown phenomenon, what is undeniable is the impact this event had. The Skywatchers movement inspired a whole generation. Young people who dedicated entire afternoons to observing and documenting the heavens. Some of them became serious researchers of the UFO phenomenon. Carlos Clemente, coordinator of the Watchmen for years, and his colleagues were the first to document something fascinating. Some objects were invisible to human eye, but could be captured with infrared and night vision cameras. Discoveries that opened up new questions about what is really floating above our cities without us noticing. In the town of Atlixco, Puebla, the epicenter of dozens of sightings during the 90s, the community decided to do something unique. In 2001, they inaugurated the UFO Monument, a metallic flying saucer at the White House, the place where hundreds of people came every weekend hoping to see the mysterious objects, a monument to an unsolved mystery. The impact was also felt in terms of public health. The Ministry of Health registered 96 cases of people with eye damage from observing the eclipse. Of these, 21 were diagnosed with solar retinitis. But here's the important fact. Out of 50 million people who saw the eclipse, there was an incidence rate of less than 1 per 100,000. The prevention campaigns, the fear instilled by the authorities, had worked. Most people protected themselves adequately. And since 1991, Mexico has developed a culture of eye-sun protection. Special regulations were created for sunscreens. The fear of looking directly at the sun has persisted, a tangible legacy of that historic day. Jaime Maussan became the most recognized figure in Mexican ufology. For over 30 years, he has compiled more than 5,000 videos and photographs from eyewitnesses. He has presented cases around the world. He has also become a controversial figure, accused by skeptics of promoting cases without rigorous verification. His presentation of the alleged alien mummies of Nazca in 2023 generated international criticism. But regardless of the subsequent controversies, his role in 1991 was fundamental. He gave a voice to thousands of witnesses, compiled evidence, and kept the debate alive. For better or for worse, it changed the conversation about UFOs in Mexico. As for Guillermo Arreguín, the man whose video started it all, his story took a bitter turn. For years, he was embroiled in a legal battle with Maussan before the Mexican Institute of Industrial Property over the rights to the audio-visual material. Arreguín accused Maussan of plagiarizing his video and profiting from it without his consent. The case was never fully resolved in the public eye, a reminder that even the mysteries of heaven can end up entangled in very human, earthly disputes. So, what conclusion can we draw from all this? The truth is, it depends on which evidence you give more weight to. If you trust astronomical calculations, expert video analysis, and the absence of reports from professional astronomers, the explanation is clear: Venus, an ordinary planet seen under extraordinary circumstances. A massive mix-up magnified by the excitement of the moment and the technological limitations of 1991 cameras. Case closed. But if you consider the multiple independent testimonies, the consistent characteristics described by people separated by hundreds of kilometers, the visual disturbances that have no obvious explanation, the subsequent sightings in different circumstances, then perhaps there's something more. Something we don't fully understand. Something the Venus explanation doesn't completely cover. And that doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrial spacecraft. It could be an atmospheric phenomenon we don't yet understand. It could be a massive optical effect that occurs only under the specific conditions of a total eclipse. It could be something we haven't even imagined yet. What makes this case fascinating is not just the mystery of the object. It's what it tells us about ourselves, about how we see the world, about how we interpret the unknown, about the gap between human perception and objective reality. 50 million people looked up at the sky that day. Some saw a planet. Others saw something inexplicable. Both groups were looking at exactly the same thing. What does that tell us about the nature of truth? On July 11, 1991, for almost 7 minutes, day turned into night over Mexico. The sun disappeared. The stars came out. The world stood still. And in that moment of cosmic wonder, millions of people saw something that made them wonder, are we alone? More than 30 years later, we still do not have a definitive answer that satisfies everyone. And perhaps that's the most fascinating thing about it all. The next total solar eclipse visible from Mexico will be on April 8, 2024. Interestingly, Jacobo Zawodowski predicted it in his 1991 broadcast. A unique opportunity for our generation. This will not happen again until April 8, 2024. He was right. 33 years later, Mexico will look to the sky again. Will there be new sightings? Will we see Venus shine again and mistake its light for something else? Or perhaps, this time, with high-definition cameras, drones, and millions of smartphones, we will capture something that finally answers the questions left by 1991? Time will tell. What is certain is this: the 1991 eclipse forever changed how Mexico views the sky. It inspired researchers. It created communities. It sparked debates that continue today. And it reminded us of something important. In a world where we think we have everything explained, where science has mapped the cosmos and named the stars, there is still room for mystery, for doubt, to look up and ask ourselves, what else is out there? Perhaps the question is more valuable than any answer. That's your story of a 1991 eclipse. The facts, the evidence, the theories. Now it's up to you to decide what to believe. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like. If you have your own theory about what happened that day, or if you know someone who was there, please share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you want more cases like this, in-depth investigations into unexplained phenomena presented with honesty and rigor, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, because every week we explore the most fascinating mysteries in our history. Next week, the Betty and Barney Hill case, 1961, New Hampshire, USA. Another fascinating case, another story that defies easy explanations. Until then, keep your eyes open. Look up at the sky from time to time. You never know what you might find up there. See you in the next episode.